That's good. And so obviously finding your own freedom on bikes. I'm sure that as a chaplain in Bathurst Prison, you were seeing people where freedom had been removed from them, for all different sorts of reasons.
This guy came to see me and he said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "I've got a drug debt." And I said, "How much is your..." This is in the jail. And I said, "How much is your drug debt?" And he says, $400 or something. It was a lot of money to build up. And I said, "How?" Well, number one, I can't do anything about the debt, but I can, try and figure some things out for you. They wouldn't have let you build up a $400 drug debt unless you were buying a lot of stuff of them. So you must have been funding yourself. So how is that happening? He said, "Well, I've been telling me folks that I've been going to TAFE lessons and I needed textbooks, and this is the TAFE teacher to send the money to buy the textbooks." It got to the point where the guilt wouldn't let him go. And so he came to see me and I said, "Well, what I'm prepared to do is to work with you and we'll try and see what the drug addiction's built on." Because I used to counsel people in the sort of the model of addiction stuff that compulsive behaviour, whether it's drug addiction or some other compulsive behaviour, is like an anaesthetic for some inner pain. So let's try and see what the pain is that you're trying to deaden off. So number one, he came out to his parents and told them the truth, and they got the money to him because he was going to be, very badly injured otherwise. So I started to work with him. And this guy, he told me that he'd been as a youngster, he'd been a gymnast. And he said, "I was doing pretty good," but he said it got to the point where I couldn't travel backwards. And, like you're doing the backflips across the floor. And then he mentioned it again, and another time he mentioned it again. After about the third time I spoke with him, and I realised that there's a clue in here about what he can't do, which was kind of going backwards into his life. So let's try and dig a bit deeper and deeper. We'll go backwards through his childhood to see what happened. And it just got to one point suddenly where his eyes opened up and he said, "It's Dave." And I said, "Who's Dave?" And he said, "The guy over the back fence who was friends with everybody, all the families in that neighbourhood." And he put a tent in his backyard and he invited me to spend nights in the tent with him, sort of camping out as if we were in the jungle or something. And so as a youngster, he started to be sexually abused by this guy. And so it's the first time he'd ever spoken about it. Mm. He wanted me to get in touch with his mum and dad just to try and let them know the way I've been working with him. So anyway, they said we knew something had happened when he was 10 or 12 or so, because his gymnastics just fell off. Might have been a bit older than 10 or 12. His gymnastics fell off and we had him to the doctor. His behaviour changed. We had him to the doctor, to counsellors. Nothing happened. Now, what happened once this guy started to talk about it and free up from it? Well, that particular, we wear that jail in our mind at times. We sometimes have iron bars around our thinking. And what happened with this guy is those bars just dissolved. But he was then able to, the addiction just disappeared from him, most extraordinary. That was a fella who, just this moment of recognition of what had really gone wrong in his life and feeling strong enough somehow to tell another person.
It's amazing, what you're sharing there is really his freedom was taken from him at an early age through someone else's actions.
Yep.
But then that ability to trust someone and open up and talk about that really brought a release in his life, didn't it? Like that. Yeah. I mean, it just shows you the power, doesn't it, of being real, like finding people that you can trust, whether that's, in your own club or outside of that, other riders, just finding someone that you can really rely on as you're honest, to talk about things and not be judged or not feel put down or condemned, but rather in yourself find a level of freedom. So quite amazing. What about I wrote this down as Reckless Rob. Because when you were telling me the other night, tell us about Reckless Rob.
We had a sort of saying in the jail, he's just one of the young and stupids. So that's a description of people who, in there, like the jails are full of 45-year-old men who are still 15-year-olds in their head. and that Rob would have been in his 30s probably, and he was in jail for stupid stuff. He just did stupid things. He wasn't criminally intent on anything, but he'd just do stuff and end up, and it was things like driving. He was, didn't have a licence, and so what happens then? The RTA slaps another 5 years on the end of you anyway, whatever your sentence is. And anyway, for some reason or other, I really can't remember now, and Rob was his name. I only use his name because he's given me permission to talk about his story. We maintained friends after he got out. And he came along and said, "Can you say a prayer for me?" He said, "I just feel like something's got to change." And I said, "Okay." So we'll get up in the chapel, and I said, "Just stand here and close your eyes, and I'm just going to put my hands on your shoulders, and if you're okay with that, and just sort of ask some blessing from God on you, and I can't make a change in you." And anyway, he closed his eyes. And he said, "Oh, okay, God, what do you got for this guy?" And he stood there for a minute, and then he said, "I can see stuff." And I said, "Well, don't open your eyes or anything. Tell me what you can see." And he said, "I can see my dad, and he's getting his belt off." And what had happened is that he started to relive again in a safe kind of environment. That's the safe stuff that Matt just mentioned. And he started to relive a lot of the violence that he got from his dad. And he's going to get the electrical extension cord, and he'd whip him with this stuff. And I'm really careful about triggering people in that sort of stuff. I grew up with a whole lot of abuse, and I just don't need to be triggering other people. I understand what that's like. But Rob then called it, and he sort of, all this story that he's telling me stopped, and he said, he opened up and he said, "Was that some kind of projector prayer?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "It's like I was watching someone with a projector on a screen inside me eyelids." And I said, "I've got no idea what happened to you, mate, but, something did." And anyway, he got out of jail. And he got out of jail with one of the volunteers who came into the jail, and who put him up. And you had a spare room, you can live in that. The volunteer was a dairy farmer, and Joe, the dairy farmer, was up at 4:30 in the morning, and he complained to me. "Oh, Rob," he said, "he doesn't get up till 8 o'clock, and he needs 3 cups of coffee to get him going." And Rob, you say, "Joe's up at 4:30 in the morning, and he wants me to be up to help him with the cows." That didn't last long. However, one of the things that happened with Rob is that he got the job of cleaning the cathedral at Bathurst, and the bishop's office, which is next door. And the bishop's office has got the bishop and secretaries and the business manager for the whole diocese. There's quite a number of staff in there. And I went past one morning, and he came out, he saw me, and he said, look at this, and he's shaking this bunch of keys. And I said, "What's that, mate?" And he said, "This is the keys I have for work." And I said, "Mate, that's more keys than I had walking around in the jail." And he picked one up and he said, "What do you reckon that key is?" And I said, "I don't know, what is it?" And he said, "That's the key to the bishop's office." And I thought, this is just so silly. What a crazy situation. That here's this guy who's been in and out of jail for most of his life, and now his job's cleaning the bishop's office, and he's got the key to the whole setup. And so, some things happen. So anyway, Rob, he stayed clear after that. He just stayed out of jail. He got married.
Yep.
And settled down a bit, and he got his licence back, because you could work through your licence in a different kind of way after a while. They realised, having someone, you're not going to get a driver's licence for the next 35 years is a stupid thing to do to people.
The thing that struck me when you were talking about that the other night too, Kim, is again, it's someone who gets to a point in their life where they're willing to be open, and like you said, that projector prayer thing. He starts thinking about things that happened, and then starting to think about where that restrained him and sort of pulled away from who he could be and really sent him on a certain direction, and then is able to relive that, but in a safe environment. So therefore, he's able to then really experience freedom, like you said, getting out, getting married, working, that sort of thing.
It's the only time I can remember ever praying with anybody where that sort of thing has happened, where they've kind of somehow relived some past thing of their life. I mean, people get triggered all the time. So,
I think that's a good point you make too. It's like, if you're in a bright lit room with a group of people, someone's going to have a headache. You don't have to be a psychic to know that. And the reality is, with this many people gathered together, there probably are people here who may have suffered some form of emotional or physical or sexual abuse when you were younger, and we definitely don't want to trigger that tonight. However, I hope that what you'll find if you're in that space is that there is people that you can talk to, you can be in a safe place, and you actually can be free of that. That doesn't have to constantly weigh you down.